and thank you very much for joining us today. My name is Ian Scott, and I am the founder of Scott Legal. And today we are going to talk about different investor visa options in the United States. So we're going to cover a number of different visa types for investors and entrepreneurs. Just before we get started, a few housekeeping items. Scott Legal is a full-service immigration law firm. We do have a focus on employment-based visas. We do a number of different webinars. So each of these topics that we're going to talk about today, there are webinars that we regularly do where we will go into much more depth for each of these topics. So you can sign up for our webinars to see one of these in more detail. The other thing that we will be doing is this webinar is going to be recorded, and as it is recorded, it will be posted on our YouTube channel, and we do encourage you to go to the YouTube channel and subscribe, because there are a number of different videos that are actually posted there. In terms of questions, if you do have questions, please put your questions in the Q&A or the chat box, and we will get to them. And the other thing that we will send you after this has been done is a copy, or link rather, where you are able to find a guide, an E2 visa, NIW, EB5. So all of the different visas or examples that we are going to talk about today, all of the different visa options that we talk about for investors and entrepreneurs, you will be able to actually find a guide that goes into a lot more detail on each of these. So without further ado, we will jump into the presentation. And the first visa that we're going to talk about is an E2 visa. Now, an E2 visa is very near and dear to my heart because it is the visa that I'm in the United States on. And this is a visa for entrepreneurs. It's a non-immigrant visa. Although it's a temporary visa, it is renewable indefinitely. So it is a visa that someone could live and work in the United States for the rest of their lives, really. I have 2 U.S. citizen kids, home in the United States, etc. So it is really a visa that allows you to live and work in the United States indefinitely. The visa is available to nationals from around 80 different countries, and that's going to be based on your passport, so not your country of birth. And there are countries in many continents. So there's a number of countries in Europe, another number of countries in North America, South America, Africa. So a lot, definitely lots of options, and as I said, around 80 different countries where you would be able to get to this particular visa. So the key is that you are a national from the treaty country, and then the next thing is that you do have to make an investment. Now, we're going to talk in some slides, some of the following slides, how much that investment should be. But this visa, it is an investor visa, and it does require that you invest money in the United States. And that money has to be at risk. So you can't just put that money in a bank account. The money does have to be at risk. So that means that it's actually been spent. And that is, so if you're, for example, someone might want to open a restaurant, so they'd have to spend the money to get the lease and the equipment and buy the food, etc. Someone may want to start a service-oriented business, so they'd have to do everything, spend all of the money that's needed to get that particular business up and running. The money that's spent, you do have to show the government that the money came from as a legitimate source. So if you came from savings, you might show tax returns. If it came from sale of a house, you may show documentation related to that sale. Gifts and loans are fine for E2. You can get a gift from a friend or relative, and or loan from a friend or relative. And then in terms of the amount of the investment, it really is going to depend on the type of business, but we're going to speak about that a little bit more as we go through the remainder of the presentation. So the expenditures, they're going to be on a number of different things. So we can spend money on equipment, inventory, marketing, employees, really anything that's required to get the business up and running. And this E2 visa can be obtained by starting a business, which a lot of our E2 visas are, or it can be obtained by purchasing a business. So you can purchase a restaurant, you can purchase a gas station, you can purchase a convenience store, you can purchase a franchise, an accounting franchise, or any other type of franchise, or you can actually start a business. We do a lot of, I'd say, the primarily people who want to start businesses, but there are a lot who purchase a business as well. And if you do purchase a business, you can enter into an escrow arrangement in certain circumstances where, as long as the only condition related to the transfer of the funds is that the E2 visa has to be approved. The other key thing with related to E2 visas has to do with hiring employees. So one is investment, two is hiring employees. And so that's what E2 is really all about. That's why the US government has and this particular visa. And really, we're looking at 3 or so employees over a period of 5 years. And if you're buying a business, you should really be looking at buying a business with around 3 employees. So that's something to keep in mind. The other thing with this business, it's not that someone, E2 isn't an option for someone who's just thinking about starting a business. You really have to do everything that's required to get the business up and running, and you have to do that before you apply. So your lease is going to be signed, your entity is going to be set up, your bank account is going to be set up, you're going to have contracts or letters of intent from customers or clients. You're going to have all of the required licenses that are required for the particular type of business. So all of that is going to be done even before you submit the application. The develop and direct the operation, that's really usually accomplished by just having the requisite experience, but also owning 50% of the business. So the E2 business in the United States has to be at least 50% owned by nationals of the treaty country, and not 51, just 50% is fine. So two people, in essence, can get, two investors can get an E2 visa if they owned it 50-50. And they can be different nationalities as well, as long as they are ultimately, they're both nationalities fall under the E2 treaty list. And then the only other requirement is that you have to intend to return once you didn't have the E2 visa. But again, this visa allows you to stay here indefinitely. The key question that we get for E2 visas is how much is required in terms of spending. So the investment is supposed to be substantial. That's what the government uses in terms of the description. So there is no specific amount, but it really is going to depend on the type of business. So if it's a service-oriented business, you may be able to get away with a lot less. Whereas if it's a business like a restaurant or something that costs a lot more money to get set up, then it might be hundreds of thousands of dollars that's required. But at any rate, even though service-oriented business can be set up with a lot less than 50,000, we don't recommend applying with less than 50,000. And even 50,000 is a low investment amount. So the other kind of thing that determines how much you're going to invest is the overall strength of your case. So sometimes a case can be very strong, and even sometimes it's even the type of business. A restaurant is always going to be a good E2 visa case because the examiner can always picture lots of workers, a doctor's office as well, lots of workers. So sometimes if the overall strength of the case is if the case is very strong, maybe you already have employees working at the company, that's also going to make a strong case. Then that can sometimes account for a lower investment amount. And then, of course, where you apply, because not all, you usually apply for E2s at a consulate, and not all consulates are created equal. But generally speaking, you are going to look at the business and see how much it costs to get that business up and running. And if the business is $300,000-$400,000, you really should be spending 100% of the money to show that you have actually invested a substantial amount. And with E2 visas, franchises are great, both franchises in terms of if you want to purchase a franchise, but also if you want to start a franchise, the consulates really love those. So they're a really good choice for E2 visas. And as I said earlier, that E2 visas, really what they're all about is hiring employees. So you do have to hire employees. And again, 3 to 4 full-time employees is good over a 5-year period. And the way we show this for a startup is we usually show business plan. And the business plan is going to, a key part of the business plan is going to be the executive summary, but the business plan is going to have to have 5 years of financial data, cash flow statement, income statement, balance sheet. But also, a good thing to show is contracts or letters of intent. That's good to show that you're going to be able to hire US employees. And then I said earlier, if you are purchasing a business, you want to make sure that either the business has employees already, or that if you are planning on purchasing a business that isn't doing that well and turning it around, you're going to have to describe or have lots of evidence showing that you're able to turn the business around. So that is the E2 visa, very, very popular investor visa in the United States. And, we do a lot of them. And as I mentioned earlier, it's the visa that I'm in the United States on. So the next visa that we're going to talk about is the National Interest Waiver. Now, the National Interest Waiver is a green card. So the National Interest Waiver falls under the EB2 category of EB2 category, and with the EB2 category, what that means is that that is a green card, and the EB2 category is both for doing an E2, both for doing a national interest waiver, but also when the company wants to sponsor you for a green card. So both of these are, what you'll see in terms of under the EB2 category. And under the EB2 category, you do have to, there's a threshold requirement, and that is going to be, that's going to be that you have an advanced degree. So that's going to be a bachelor's degree or higher, plus 5 years of experience, or a master's degree or higher. So that's those are going to be the two. And then you can also qualify in this category if you have what's called exceptional ability. So, and we do a separate webinar on national interest waiver. So we do encourage you to attend that and to really go through the requirements in a lot more detail. But the key, after you've met the threshold requirements, threshold EB2 requirements, then the next thing that you're going to be looking at is you're going to be looking at whether or not you meet the three-pronged Danisar test. And what this three-pronged Danisar test is, it is really looking at whether the first thing you're going to do is take a look at, what is your proposed endeavor? What is it you're coming to the United States to do? And does that have substantial merit, and is it of national importance? So that's going to be the key. So it could be that the proposed endeavor, it creates a significant economic impact, especially in an area that needs some type of economic stimulation or needs job creation. It could be creation of jobs. A lot of the time, the expert letters are going to, so if let's say that you are relying on jobs, you might have an expert report from an economist or expert letters describing what it is that you're coming to the United States to do, why it's in the national interest. Often we like to combine if we are looking at economic benefit, we like to combine that with what the company is doing. So let's say the person's coming to start a cybersecurity company, then let's say they're planning on hiring a bunch of employees, we would include that as one of the benefits of national interest, but then we would also talk about the importance of cybersecurity and what it is that the person is coming to do. The next thing is the person has to be well positioned to advance the endeavor, and that's going to look at their experience, going to look at whether, what track record they have with respect to moving these types of things forward. And that is going to, those types of things they're going to see, like if it's a business for an entrepreneur or investor, they're going to look to see, has the business been capitalized? Is there sufficient investment? Do they have other investors that are coming? Is there some type of intellectual property that might be useful for this? So those are the types of things you're looking at. And then the final requirement is that the government should waive the labor certification. So we're going to look at a number of different things there to assess whether or not the government should, in fact, because the government right now says that one of their interests is to protect U.S. jobs. And so we would look at this and say, well, is it something that the government should actually waive the labor certification such that the person has a lot of other benefits that they should actually waive? So that we're going to look at that on balance. The next green card category that we're going to look at that we sometimes see people moving to entrepreneurs and investors moving towards is extraordinary ability, and sometimes in the field of business or entrepreneurship. And we've highlighted 4 areas where, because what happens here is that there are a number of different criteria listed here, and in order to meet this particular requirement, you have to at least meet 3 of the criteria. And here we've highlighted, the ones we've highlighted are the ones that might be more related to business and entrepreneurs, like a high salary, judging the work of others. But once you meet three, then you have to do a secondary analysis to assess whether or not overall the person still rises to the level of moving to the top of their field. And that's what this particular green card category is trying to do. It's trying to assess whether or not you move to the top of your field. And when we're looking at the original scientific, scholarly, or business-related contribution, sometimes what we see here is if the person has intellectual property that the business has created, if the person has kind of government or agencies talking about them. It could be that they're attracting investors, or if they're being accepted by different incubators and things like that. Sometimes judging the work of others, the same thing. If they're deciding which people are getting accepted into these incubators and things like that, it could be a basis, because really the incubators are saying, well, this person is at the top of their field, and as a result of that, they're able to provide expert analysis related to that. For both the NIW and the extraordinary EB1 extraordinary ability, you're able to self-petition, so you don't need an actual employer for these. You could self-petition if you like, and it is a two-step process where you're first going to file an I-140, and then depending on whether you're in the United States or outside of the United States, you'll file an I-485 if you're in the United States, or if you're outside of the United States, consular processing. And then you do have to look to see whether or not there's a backlog, because EB1, for example, right now there's no backlog, but there's for certain countries, but not many. But for EB2, all of the countries are backlogged by at least a year and a half. And then if you can file the I-485, so you can only file the I-485 if the category is current, then you are actually able to file an I-765, so work authorization and travel authorization at the same time as that. So it is one option to consider. So the next investor visa that relates to entrepreneurs and investors is EB5. And so this is we'll call it the $1 million green card. So you're either going to invest in what's called a regional center, which is, think of a regional center as let's say a hotel chain that wants to raise a bunch of capital. So they're going to get 100 investors each to invest $800,000, and they're going to build a hotel or something like that. And then the EB5 investor is going to be a fairly passive investor, and they're going to invest the money with the regional center, and the regional center is going to do all the work with respect to creating jobs, versus direct investment, where there is someone has their own business. So let's say someone wants to start a restaurant, and then they want to invest $800,000 or $1,050,000 in the restaurant. And then they're going to create the jobs themselves, so they have more control over their own destiny, more control over their own returns, et cetera. In terms of the EB5 requirements, the first and foremost is going to be investment. So it's going to be either 800,000 or 1,050,000, and that's going to depend. The difference is going to depend on where the business is. So if the business is in a targeted employment area, so an area that's either a rural area or an area where the unemployment rate is 1.5 times the national average, then it's going to be 800,000, and for everything else, it's going to be 1,050,000. And then the other key requirement for EB5 is the creation of U.S. jobs. So it is 10 full-time jobs, and the direct versus indirect. If you're in regional center, you can sometimes include indirect jobs, so not people that have actually been hired by you, but the indirect employment that's created as a result of the enterprise. But the employment has to be with full-time. It has to be U.S. citizens or green card holders. Both regional centers and direct investments have business plans. And let's say you're starting your own business and you're investing the 800,000 or the 1,050,000, you can't just put the money in a bank account. You do have to actually show that some of that is committed, and that the rest is going to be spent, and some spent and plans to spend the rest. And really, one key thing here is, because you can only hire green card holders and U.S. citizens, you want to make sure that you are documenting full-time workers, so you want to register for E-Verify. One very significant thing with EB5 is the source of funds. So probably one of the key reasons that some EB-5 petitions get denied is source of funds. And you do have to show the government where the money came from. And it is not a light exercise. It is much more like an audit. When you look at E2, that requirement exists, but it's a very light exercise, whereas this is much more of an audit. And the investment does have to be equity investment. It can't be like a loan or something like that. And in terms of filing, this is a three-step process where you're going to file an I-526 petition, and then you're going to file an I-485 or do consular processing. And one great thing now is the I-485 petition can be filed in the US as long as the category is current concurrently with the I-526. So people could actually have quite a bit of time in the United States, because the EB-5 program, the I-526, they're taking about 4 to 5 years to be adjudicated. But if you can file the I-485 in the US, you're actually given the ability to stay in the US and live and work here during that time. Because if you file the I-485, you can file the travel authorization and work authorization. The most countries are current for EB-5, but there are some that are not. China and India are not, except for these carve-out categories. So if you invest in a $800,000 project, whether it's regional center or direct investment, then the category is going to be current, and we anticipate that being current for some time. And we talked about you can't just put money in a bank account. It has to be at risk. And loans and gifts are fine for EB-5. So you just have to, if it is a gift, you have to show that you've actually paid the gift tax. And if it's a loan or a gift, you have to show where the money actually came from still. So if you gift, the person who gave you the gift, they would have to show where they got the money from. And then one thing to keep in mind for EB-5 is that, if you're purchasing a business, E2, that works for E2, but it doesn't work for EB-5. Because for EB-5, the money that's spent has to be linked to job creation. So that's something to keep in mind. And there's no percentage that you have to own, and there's no kind of country restrictions with respect to EB-5, unlike E2. And you can't have any type of guaranteed return on the investment. And there are a few differences that we've touched on with E2. There's source of funds, which is quite different. There's no country determination. E2 is country specific. The categories on EB-5 with respect to current versus not current are based on country of birth rather than nationality. This EB-5 has specific investment amounts and specific job numbers, whereas E2 is a lot more general or fluid. And then the final slide really is some other areas where sometimes we see investors getting visa benefits. So an L1 new office, so this could be someone who has an entity abroad and they're executive or manager, and then they want to expand either a branch or subsidiary or affiliate in the United States, and they want to move either the founder or executive or manager to the United States. So that's one. The international entrepreneur rule, I'm not going to spend any time on that really, because it's a program that is, for all intents and purposes, dead. It's used very infrequently. It just was set up in a particularly odd manner that it just hasn't been used at all, or not frequently anyway. There've been a handful of approvals. Family-based options, so sometimes someone might be here on an E2 or something like that, then they meet a US citizen or a green card holder and marry and get status that way. Diversity lottery, what's interesting, we have a lot of clients on E2 that apply for the diversity lottery and then end up winning. And then the final one is E1. The E2 is the investor visa, but someone could have a business abroad, but the business is based on trade, and the business is substantial trade between the U.S. and the treaty country. So this is again like based on treaty country and being a national of the treaty country, and the E1 sometimes can be a visa that is utilized by investors and entrepreneurs. Well, those were all of the prepared remarks that we had, and I'm just going to the question and Q&A box, and I don't see any questions, so we will end it here. And thank you very much for joining us today. And as I said, we will send you a link to a number of different things where you can set up a consult, a link to get some guides, a link to see this video on our YouTube channel where you can subscribe. And again, we do encourage you to sign up for future webinars because we do regularly have those. Thank you.